Hey, great. Thanks for joining us. It is my pleasure to have with us in the studio today LeAnne Ponder and Tim Jennings. They are master storytellers, as you just heard from the story Four Friends and a Tiger.
Yep.
Yes.
What can you tell us a little bit about that, kind of where that one came from?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Brand new, right?
It's the oldest story that we know. It's about 4,000 years old. That was when it was first written down in a collection of, probably the earliest collection of folk tales from India. And
That's not to say that it was written down and that's how it was created. It was created by people telling it and changing every time it got told.
Right, right.
We've changed it some.
And finally somebody wrote them down. Did I say the book was called Panchatantra?
I don't think so.
And, and it is, the thing I love, especially about the Indian stories, is that they were told so long ago, and you can hear them, and we tell them now, relevant to things that are happening right now, such as shortage of water or making scientific decisions without checking them out. You know, it's just amazing.
Without
really.
common sense.
Yeah.
And so how do you find them, though? I mean, 4,000
Well, that particular one, it's a classic text. So we're always looking. The classic text is called the Panchatantra, and it has been sort of preserved, being rewritten from millennium to millennium. And actually, my friend, our friend Lar Duggan, showed me the book, the Panchatantra, said you might be interested in this.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh, that's nice.
I think I stumbled across it. People also are familiar with the story as a separate tale that shows up in collections of stories from time to time. And we do find a certain percentage, I would say, majority of our stories we find them in written texts like that, either old texts, or there was a sort of a fashion for writing them down, but just as they were going out of oral transmission in the middle to late 1800s. And
we went through a flurry of collecting out-of-print books of folktales. I mean, every time we went into a town and there was a little used bookstore, you know, and by now I have a whole room. I mean, it's a fairly small room, but it's a whole room dedicated to folk tales, all in their separate countries.
So what is a folk tale, though?
Well, there's different definitions, but the kind that we tell are stories that do not have a known author. They were not created by writing them down. Everybody who tells them somewhat differently, and it is a mystery as to how they are generated. People don't really understand how they were generated. It's kind of like a cultural dreaming. And some of the same psychologists who are interested in dreams are interested in folktales and apply the same kinds of analysis to them. We don't do that. We think, my favorite scholar of folktales is a man named Luthi, and he said, at the moment you analyze a folktale, the folktale dies. Whatever's good about it, when you say that's what's good about it, it turns it into like a picture or something, and what's good about it goes away, the magic is gone. And I think the story is what it is. And since no one person created it, no one person can really say what it's about. You can have opinions after you've told it for quite a while, but frequently your opinions relate to things that you obsess about. So,
I have a favorite quote too, from Sallustius.
Yeah?
Myths are things that never happened but always are. I love that. And that's the way folk tales, you know, what happens with folk tales talks about, they're very dreamlike in a way. And they're very, well, I was going to say sturdy, but you have to tell them to keep them sturdy. And
So is that why they're not written down? Is because then it...
Well, they are written down.
yeah.
They're written down. That's one of the first things that get written down are the tales that are already there.
Yeah.
And a tale will get transmitted occasionally. When there aren't people carrying them by word of mouth, occasionally a book will show up. So when the Arabian Nights showed up in Europe around the, whenever that was, I think it was during the Renaissance or a little before the Renaissance, all of a sudden those stories started popping up in oral transmission and were collected 100 years later in oral transmission. So yeah, it's sort of like a caterpillar and a butterfly, I think. I think that it can go into text. It precedes the idea of writing, obviously. Our brains are set up for story. Some people say that's what language really is for story.
Telling, huh?
And there's all kinds of storytelling, but one kind, and the kind that we've spent a long time working on, is these kinds of stories, what the Germans called Märchen, what folklore scholars call Märchen, which is, you're familiar with them. It's like Grimm's fairy tales, or East of the Sun, West of the Moon, or certain myths. Cupid and Psyche plainly are this kind of thing. There's like a space in our brain that helps make this stuff through the ear and the mouth, and it does.
What's the differentiation then from like a song, creating a song and?
Well, there's a clear similarity between singing and talking, but and they're both linear. They both exist in time, but songs, you know.
And there has been music put around folk material. I mean, this seems, you know, that.
And there's stories that have songs in them. You can tell when the singing happens, though. It's plainly different. I mean, we sang in that one, and it was different. You could see the difference. There's a form of music called the traditional ballad, which I had some of those songs sung to me when I was a kid. Which tells a story, but you know, they rhyme and they have a certain meter, and they're more likely to stay the same after they've been, you know,
right.
if you learn it because there's a certain right way to do it, where there's less of that kind of feeling about the tales. You really do feel like they change more quickly, I guess.
And over the years, I think one of the ways that folktales become very interesting is that people, you know, sitting in a kitchen with their whole family there, they'll tell their story, and then like one of their kids will remember this and tell it a while later and drop the least interesting parts out and keep the more interesting parts. And
so do you see the telling of tales as an alive art right now?
Well, it all depends. It's no. As in today's society, no. Folk tales have been dying out of the English language as a living performance form that you learn by ear and by heart since roughly the Industrial Revolution.
And because of the technologies.
Well, there's many
television.
Well, it precedes television, but television certainly. And I've told stories on television, and I was just telling somebody about. A kid heard me on your television program and learned the story by hearing it and told it to her friend. So there's nothing inherently. Somebody said that it was partly due to the fact that you didn't have those stretches of time when you had to film. So once factories happened, there wasn't that big period of time in the winter.
That's right, yeah.
When everybody was sort of sitting around looking for something to do. And
or doing something like knitting or weaving or sawing, or, you know.
Yeah, that you could do that with. I don't know. I think the invention of writing, certainly, I mean, oral transmission was the way culture was transmitted for quite a while, for the bulk of the time we've been in. And when texts came in, this whole ability to do that became irrelevant. There aren't schools of bards doing Homer anymore, but we still have Homer, but it's different. You have to read it, and I believe that if you actually heard somebody who knew it by heart because he heard it, it would be really different. It would be a different experience. Great. And that's certainly my experience. I read folk tales when I was a kid. I heard ballads from my mom when I was a kid. But when I heard a folk tale told by an old lady who lived not far from here, named Sarah Cleveland, she was from Lake Placid, it was just really, really, really different and really exciting to me. And that's when I knew this was probably around 1970.
My mother used to read me stories, and I really liked it. But I remember the first story that was actually told to me. Actually, it's in the 3rd grade, and the teacher told the story to the class, and I remember just being totally focused. You know, I loved one, and I loved the comfort of my mother reading, and I really suggest parents read to their kids. But the one that I heard just told was different. It was really nice.
There's a magnetism to it. I don't know how to say it. It's like a spell.
Is there subject matter in stories, range, everything? I mean, is there political commentary and, you know, sex and violence and...
well, the Grimms cut out
all of that.
the sex, and we tend not to put a lot of sex in. And it's true that one of the groups that really respond well to old folk tales is school children, or children of a certain age. I would say nursery school kids for like Three Bears and stuff like that. But as you get to the more complex stories, really going up what they call young adult, I think really respond. If you have the goods, they really like it. But there is also, you know, the form creates, so there tends to be magic. There are often talking animals, impossible situations, great danger that is gotten through somehow or other, kind of stuff. The kind of stuff you have in the dreams, really.
Well, they're very much like dreams. I used to work in a psychology clinic, and they gave me the task of sort of translating or discussing dreams and what there was the people being interviewed, and they collected their dreams, and I was supposed to just give them an idea of what the dreams related to. And it was very much like poetry. It was astoundingly like poetry. And I was a poet at the time. And they did studies in that clinic, one of which was, that I heard about, they didn't actually do that one, that if people aren't allowed to dream, if they put them in a clinic with electrodes, you know, so you can tell when they're dreaming, and when they're dreaming, they have rapid eye movement, so they know when they're dreaming.
Yeah.
And then, so if you allow the person to sleep, but wake them up once they start dreaming, then let them sleep again until they start dreaming, and wake them up again, they start to exhibit psychotic symptoms. And this is also true for cats.
So LeAnn had this insight, and I think it's true, that folk tales and folk storytelling functions as a kind of societal dreaming. And you get all kinds of distortions when people aren't doing that anymore. So I really think that these are stories, even though if you analyze them by certain kinds of techniques, they maybe look like there's something wrong with them, that they're violent or that they're greedy, or these same things can be said for dreams. But you have to have your dreams, and you have to have these stories. And I do think that society has not benefited from the fact that these stories have gone out of oral transmission. I certainly respond to them like water. When I hear them, from somebody who knows what they're doing, it's like a very thirsty man given water. I missed it.
So it's more than just oral, though. I mean, there's a bit of theater in it, too.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, right now, you said there's a bit of theater, too. You know, it's like this is communication. This is what we've always done. And there's a little bit of simple mime and just talking. You say it was about this big, you know, you say, and then the guy went, boom, and I went, ah! You know, it's just, this is normal, unmediated, unprint-centered conversational, vulgar English, American English.
And you don't tell a story out loud unless there's somebody listening.
Oh my God, it's awful.
You know,
it's awful.
In practicing, when I was trying to do stories on my own, I lived in Burlington and walked through a little community graveyard and pretended like people were listening, just so I would have a way of practicing. But
Did it work?
It was helpful.
Yeah.
Well, learning new stories was a huge chore before I started showing up.
This is so much
working
more
with
fun.
LeAnn. And, we're very persnickety. LeAnn was a writer, and I take what we're doing very seriously, and we both are language people and fussy and persnickety people. So we spent a long time getting it right. But there's always somebody listening. When we're on stage there's always somebody there, and that is a big difference.
How long have you been performing together?
Well, that's a question. Things sort of blur as time goes on.
A good 20 years.
I would say that's right, yeah.
And initially as storytellers?
Yes. Well, no,
Not initially, no. Initially, we just got together because we found each other attractive and interesting, and
it's a good place to start.
we were both working through the Arts Council, the Vermont Arts Council. She was a poet, and I was a storyteller, and we met at a meeting, appropriately enough.
And then
Is Channel 17 there recording it? By any chance?
Not that part, thank God.
We didn't want to put anything else except the relationship into what we were doing, because we'd heard of bands breaking up, and
I'd been in a band breaking up.
We just really liked what was happening, and we stayed that way for 2 years probably before we added
LeAnn was playing the harp,
Yep.
and I'd already played concertina, so we started putting those things together, and started playing on Church Street. So.
With storytelling?
No, just the music.
Just music.
Just the music.
We played music on Church Street. We did it because when I was playing on stage, my hands would shake. I was so nervous. And on Church Street, well, because I felt like I had to be perfect, and I can't be perfect. And but as people walked by or stayed, I thought, well, we did this just so I could calm down. And if people walked by, it could be that they were in a hurry. And if they stopped and listened, that was nice. And we got some compliments. We got money in the hat. I liked that. And so I really enjoyed that time of playing on Church Street. And we lived very close. We could just walk down and see what the weather was, if there were people on the sidewalk.
And at that time, there were no regulations, so it was easy that way, too.
Have a permit.
Nothing of that.
Oh, that was fun.
So, and then we were playing music, and I was still telling stories, and she had a job with the Shelburne Museum. She was telling stories and characters of 18th century peddler, and then turned that into something she was doing in the Department of Humanities. And then so we were doing things where I'd always done things, I'd always played music. I play concertina, she plays harp. We didn't bring these things together because this is a relatively informal thing, and there's no way to be informal if you're carrying a harp. But we will have our instruments with us when we do the 13th? The thing on Friday the 13th at the downstairs here at the North End Studios, along with everything else. And and then at some point I used to have a band, so at some point, I started taking turns telling stories and then playing music together, and then we said, what would happen if we tried telling a story at the same time, same as we play music together at the same time? Because she doesn't accompany me, I don't accompany her, yet we're both playing the whole tune, but we're not playing unison, we're playing different notes, and somehow it goes together. And is there a way, we thought, of telling stories so that we would have the same effect, where you definitely didn't feel like you were listening to something conflicting and didn't get confused, and it had the drive of a solo narrative and the focus of a solo narrative, but still took advantage of the extra dimension you get by having two voices.
So to try it out, we picked the shortest Grimm story that there was in the book. And Tim knew it was the shortest because he had been teaching storytelling to the kids, and when he had them pick out a story to learn, that was often the one they picked because it was the shortest.
Memorization.
So we took a long time. We took, 2 months or something?
3 months, I would say.
With that tiny
hours
little story.
a day.
Just trying to get it right. And we picked the shortest one because if it really sucked, people wouldn't have to listen for long.
It only sucked for that long. And we had several things in mind. We had the idea, similar with what I said about music, we had like old couples who, which we are now, I guess, but I was thinking specifically of an aunt and an uncle who did that. We thought of Nichols and May. We thought of the Luntz, Alfred Lynn Fontaine, who were said to be able to be talking at the same time, saying different things, but you could hear everything distinctly.
I wonder if there are any recordings of them. That would be interesting.
I don't know.
So let's jump ahead to this Friday the 13th.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we have a new
Vampire
Princess. We have a new CD coming out of a show, and it's definitely kind of a Halloween Friday the 13th show, although it's not like the movies. It's not a slasher thing. Much of it is political in the same way that that thing we just told you has a political aspect to it, but it's all old tales. Vampire Princess is an old gypsy folk tale that was collected a couple hundred years ago in the country that is now called the Czech Republic, but was then called Bohemia, from the Romany people that lived there. And we have a young Romany friend who says that he had a great uncle told it to him, a different version of it, and said that it actually originally came from Hungary.
So it's a series of stories.
The whole show is a series of stories. The one story is about a half an hour long, and then there's a number of shorter stories, and of course we play music too. And they're all...
Including the first story we learned.
Yes, that one's on there, the one that we told. Four Friends and a Tiger, one of the earliest Frankenstein stories. We thought we'd throw that in there too. And it's a good, hefty CD. It's about an hour long, and the show will be 2 parts with an intermission, and we're pricing it like a movie, and we're making the CD sales if you come to the show. I think there's actually going to be 2 shows. There's going to be one on the 13th, on that Friday the 13th.
This is September.
September 13th, and then one the following Saturday. I think that's the 21st. And they're going to be at the North End Studios in the big room there here in Winooski Avenue.
It's a nice space.
It's a beautiful space. We know Ben from long ago, Ben and April from long ago, because they're old folkies too. And we're not looking to make a lot of money out of it, which is good, because we're in the wrong business.
Always good.
That's what we're looking to do. But we think people will like it. We think that folks will enjoy the show.
So you've been telling some of these stories for a period of time.
One of the stories is a story we've been telling pretty much as long as we've been telling stories.
One of them was the first story, not the first story we told here, but the first story we learned.
Yes. One of them
I told you about, the shortest one in the Grimm's fairy tale. Yes, yes.
One of them is the Vampire Princess. The title story is our newest substantial tale, our newest long tale. We've been telling it a couple years. We wouldn't make a CD out of something until we've been telling it for a while. It takes us about a year for us to develop a story that length, and then it really should be a couple of years in performance before it swings enough.
Yeah, it really changes as you go.
To make it move until it's natural. It's as natural as speaking for us, and still has that performance edge. And
so when you start, do you start with just the story and then add the music, add the instruments after?
Well, we rarely put music into the story. There isn't any music in it. It's just
so
same as with that.
We do it between.
I see.
And there are a couple of stories that we tell that have music. There's an Irish one about a boy who gets adopted by a wolf, and we put Irish music because it's very sentimental.
Well, it's a beautiful Irish story, and we play the
story.
beautiful Irish music, and we were going to do that anyway. But then there was this one thing when he meets his wolf mother again after a long time. He speaks to her and tells her he's going to take care of her from now on, and he does it in a kind of a heightened speech, which you would expect if you were talking wolf language to a wolf, that it wouldn't sound like normal English.
Yeah.
But if you just say that kind of stuff, it sounds pathetic. If you just sort of said, "Oh, mother, you need not fear," you know, I have a hard time with that. But boy, you put a heart behind it, and people take out the hankies. It's really nice. So we do that. The stories, how we deal with the stories is a text. We find many texts as we can get. If there's a lot of different versions of it, we look at them all. And then we try to make all those things into a thing that we're comfortable with. We change some stuff, like that story we told. It's for Brahmin, but they are scholars. Brahmins were like the scholarly class as well as being the priestly class, and you know, I don't want to stop and say, by the way, what a Brahmin is
Right,
this.
right, yeah.
That's not the way they're supposed to work. They're supposed to be completely transparent. That's what we work for.
And I'd always heard of writers working together. I used to write, and I thought, how could any writers work together? I was so picky, and I thought, how could anybody do? But doing this, we're both really picky, and we tend to have similar tastes. And sometimes we have stuff we go back and forth what it needs to be, but it's a great way to.
It's a lot of fun. we do have a lot of fun with it.
We do.
I mean, there's stress with it as well. LeAnn talks about having once been a writer, and it's true. And people have blamed me for taking her away from the writerly, because she was very good. She was very good.
Have you ever written a folk tale?
Well, you can't write a folk tale, but every tale that we tell, we do write.
I wrote a folktale poem once, which you can actually find online if you just put it in Leanne Ponder. Somebody put Rumpelstiltskin online.
Mm-hmm. It was published in Esquire magazine.
Yeah,
that was one of the places that she used to publish her stuff in. But I have to tell you that a poet makes even less money than a storyteller.
Oh,
yes.
sure.
So
that's why I found it so rewarding than playing on the street.
On Church Street, that's right. That's a sign of a poet when Church Street money looks like good money to you.
Also, when you're reading poems and people listening go like this, you know, and I wanted to give them whistles or something, you know, and so this is much more rewarding because you get pause. And
people laugh and people suck in their breaths sometimes, you know, like that, you know.
So, what do you think the future is for storytelling?
For storytelling, well, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people will always be interested in this material, because it's very interesting. And you look at it, and it's just very interesting. As soon as you find it, you say, oh my God, this is interesting. This is interesting stuff. And then you try to figure out what to do with it. Well, what you have to do with it is a lot of work. If you're going to try and actually, I mean, the right thing to do with it is to learn out how to perform that so it works now the same as it did before.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I listened to Let's Pretend on the radio, and it was folktales, and they were acted out by, I still remember the witch's name was Miriam Wolf. I liked the name Wolf. But later on, probably not long before I met Tim, I thought, you know, I would really like to do something with folktales, you know, and I tried to think, you know, and I didn't want to dress up, although I ended up doing that with Brian.
Well, so Venus, you did.
Right. But it wasn't folktales, you know.
No, that's true, a little bit, but not a lot.
And it was so pleasing to me to have a straightforward way of presenting folktales, because they really have been a part of my life.
The right way to do it, I think, is to tell the story the way it's always been told. You can't really, because you didn't learn it by ear, or if you did, you're stealing somebody else's work to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. But to learn to tell the stories so that it works the same way it used to, which is something that sounds natural,
right,
and conversational, and is presented as old material being told to a modern audience. That's always what it's been. It's always been known as being old stuff that we're listening to, not back then. We're not pretending to be back then. We're not pretending to be fairy tale people. We're listening to it now with our current sensibilities.
So it has a relevancy.
So it's got to get in there, and you can't be listening to it the way you would look at a museum artifact. It's got to be, oh my God, like art. It's got to say, whoa. I mean, there's certain old art. You look at it. You look at those cave paintings of the bison, and that knocks you for a loop just as much as anything else. And that's hopefully, the texts are there, but they're like fossils, and you have to make them come alive. And I would love it if there was more people actually making the old texts come alive. There was a period of time when more people were trying to do that, but it's hard.
There are, as you say, that young woman who learned a tale and told it, and the fifth grade girl or sixth grade girl that told you a way her auntie told.
People still tell stories, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I learned a really good version from the Golden Arm, which is an old ghost story that was popularized by Mark Twain 150 years ago. And I learned it from a little girl who told a very different version of it. I tried learning it from Twain. I tried learning
Even had a book saying how to tell a story.
That's true, but it was wrong. I mean, it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough. You couldn't really figure out how to tell that without having seen it. Hal Holbrook tried doing it from that and from accounts that other people had of what it was like to see. And I saw him tell it, and it didn't work. It fell flat. This little girl told it, and it knocked me for a loop.
Yeah.
And
Great.
so there's something in there that if you
She got.
yeah, absolutely. And so now I tell it that way. I tell it the way the little girl told it. And I'll do that on Friday the 13th, if anybody's interested.
That's right.
So let's pitch that one more time. Okay. Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th and Saturday the 21st. Here on North Winooski Avenue at the North End Studios downstairs at 8 o'clock, $8 for, I think there's a student price, but I'm not positive.
How can they get more information?
Well, you can call the North End Studios. I don't have the phone number, but it's in the book. Or you can email me, tim@folktale.net, or you can visit our website, which is folktale.net. And we'd love to hear from you anyway. And if there's any folks who remember us on Church Street or any folks who remember our storytelling from years gone by, we'd love to talk to you.
Keep in touch.
I can't imagine that there aren't a lot of those folks out there, because you definitely were
We've been around a while.
part of the community.
We've been around a while. Well, I loved living in Burlington. I love living where we are now, but it's nice. I feel a part of things here.
You can grow thousands of beans and blueberries where we are now.
Yes, without going somewhere else.
Hey, well, LeAnne Ponder and Tim Jennings, I want to thank you both very much for sharing a wonderful story and sharing some insights into the whole art of storytelling.
It's been a total pleasure, Rob.
And we'll look forward to seeing you on September 13th, right downstairs. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more Channel 17 programming.